relationship. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm going to turn off the music. And we've just had a host of technical problems, even up to the last minute. So I'm so grateful that we got on time. This morning, we had about maybe a 7 or 8 minute delay. So thank you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you're here. Tell us where you're from. Write down in the chat room where you're from. I'll check in a minute just to see where everybody's from. We've had a ton of people from all over the world. We had a couple people from Australia and New Zealand this morning, a lot of folks from Canada. It's wonderful when we do a webinar on the morning times because it helps people on the other side of the world who may be getting up or going to sleep or whatever. It's more easily accessible to them than right now. And so I'm so glad you're here. And so again, tell us where you're from and let me tell you a little bit about how tonight's going to work. All right, so we're going to do 5 red flags that you're in an emotionally destructive marriage. And I'm going to not only give you those flags. I'm hearing a lot of feedback. So we're going to do 5 red flags that you're in an emotionally destructive marriage. Okay. I'm going to not only give you those flags. I hope you can hear me still. Technical. You know me and technical. We're not so good at all this. And so thank you so much for being here. And let me just start again. So put your name in, tell us where you're from. And tonight we're talking about 5 red flags that you're in an emotionally destructive marriage. And I'm also not just going to tell you that, but I'm also going to tell you what to do about it. And I'm going to give you some very real content that maybe is different than what you've heard before from other Christian teachers on difficult, destructive, whatever, disappointing marriages. You're going to hear some real meat from God's word about what you can do differently that perhaps will really encourage you and maybe even surprise you. I also have a special resource for you if you stay till the end. I'm not talking about the very, 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 very end because I'm going to open up to Q&A and we might be here for a while because it's a little bit in the evening so I can stay a little bit later. I'm not as crunched by time constraints as I was this morning. But if you stay till the end of the webinar, you get to get a special gift from me because I appreciate you giving me your time. All right, so we're going to get started and let me just look for a minute and see where you're all from. And then I'm going to switch over to the slides and we're going to go. All right. So I see people from Brazil and Canada and Virginia, North Carolina, Hershey, PA. All right. Illinois, Australia, Illinois, more Australia, New York, Maryland, California, Canada. All right. Another Australia, New York, Texas. Wow. We've got people from all over the place. Idaho, another Australia. I want to come to Australia. My husband and I were just talking about that. We would love to plan a trip to Australia. So if you're from a church that would love to host me and come and talk about destructive marriages, email me and I'll talk to you about that because I would love to do that. All right, we're going to transition over to the slides and get started. If you haven't downloaded your handout, this would be a good time to do that. You have a free handout and you can download that so it'll be easier for you to take notes if you'd like to. If you're not knowing where the handout is, it's right on your screen where you can download it. And if you want to just download it later, that's fine. You'll get a replay of this webinar. If you just kind of want to sit back and really just take it all in without having to worry about taking notes, you can actually watch it again and take notes then. So we're going to switch it over. I'm going to get my tech support to help me do that. And we're going to get started. All righty. All right, so let's get started. And these are the 5 red flags that you are in an emotionally destructive relationship, probably most likely marriage. Now, perhaps you signed up for this webinar because you already know something's wrong. You feel it every day and every night. And you're sick of living confused, being told you're crazy, and feeling afraid of what's really wrong inside. You're tired of being ignored or intimidated or bullied or bashed by the one who's promised to love and cherish you the most. But you don't know what to do, and you don't want to do the wrong thing. You don't want to mess up your kids. You don't want to disappoint God, or even give up hope that your spouse might change. You might even be here because you're starting to get sick of your own self. You don't like the person you're becoming in the midst of your destructive marriage. For example, you're afraid to be honest with your spouse. You avoid conflict like the plague. And you haven't been true to the woman that God's called you to be. Maybe you find yourself reactive or angry, defensive, depressed, or just feeling small like a little child who hasn't grown up and you have no idea what to do next. You're afraid to speak up for yourself. You're afraid to take a stand. You're afraid to put your foot down to some things in your marriage that desperately need to change. So I just want to tell you that I am so glad that you're here. and that you took a courageous step to sign up for this webinar. And so I have 3 promises for you. First, I'm going to help you tonight get crystal clear whether or not you're in an emotionally destructive marriage. Second, I want you to know that the Bible does talk about verbal and emotional abuse and the damage it does to people. I just read a horrible article about a young woman, her 3 children, who were murdered by her husband. And she had never had any physical abuse happen to her, yet she went to the police saying her husband is verbally abusive and destructive, and they did nothing. And she finally decided to leave, and he murdered them all. And so you are in danger, even if there has been no physical abuse. And we're going to talk about verbal and emotional abuse. And probably more important for many of you is that the Bible does speak about this. And I'm going to show you where and what it says. And then third, I want to give you some very specific steps, 5 steps tonight I'm going to give you that you can take right now so that you will gain greater confidence, courage, and support so that you will become stronger, saner, and safer, because it's only from that place of strength, sanity, and safety that you'll be able to make the wisest choice about what to do about the future of your marriage. Now, in case you don't know who I am and you showed up here because someone invited you or you saw something on Facebook, let me just take a few minutes to introduce myself. I'm Leslie Vernick. I'm a Christian counselor for over 35 years. I'm a relationship coach, speaker, and author. I have 2 grown children, and I am the nana of 3 beautiful girls. The one on my lap is Leilani. She is 6. She just turned 6. The one in the middle is the oldest, Amaya. She's 7. And the little one on the far left-hand side is Natalia, and she's going to turn 5 in a few days. I've also written 7 books, including the best-selling books, The Emotionally Destructive Relationship and The Emotionally Destructive Marriage. But I want you to know something more personal about me, because I never began my professional career thinking I would be an expert on abuse, but God had different issues. In fact, I was abused, and it was because of my own personal experience growing up with an abusive mom and my estrangement from her most of my adult life that brought me to ask the very hard questions about how does this work in our Christian faith? Like, how do we love a dishonorable parent? How do we show grace and forgiveness? And what about boundaries? How do you deal with these conflicts on the horizontal plane when you're dealing with an angry, bitter, unrepentant, indifferent, harsh, abusive, scary person? Mine was my mother, maybe yours is your husband, especially when they're in your family and you're living with them. Now, I didn't know the full answer back then, but I did know what it was like to live with the effects and the consequences of verbal and physical abuse, even as I tried to walk out my personal faith and practice it in my profession. I tell you this because I think God allowed my suffering as a child and even as a young adult to help me become more aware and to open my eyes to a very real and ugly reality in people's homes, even to those who go to church, even in those homes whose people profess to be Christians. In the 70s, yes, a long, 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 long time ago, right after I finished graduate school, I found myself on my first job. And my first job was working as a social worker in a local hospital. And guess what God had me doing? Something nobody had ever done before. He gave me the assignment of teaching doctors and nurses how to be aware of child abuse in the emergency room. You see, the laws about reporting child abuse had just been passed. And also in the 80s, before it was popular to screen childcare workers in churches, I was pleading with pastors and church leaders to make sure that those who were most vulnerable, our children, were never left in the care of someone who might harm them. Now, after I wrote my second book, How to Act Right When Your Spouse Acted Wrong, I started to write another book. I wanted to write a book about healthy marriages. I was looking for a more positive spin on my ministry and in my writing, but God said no. He said to me, Leslie, I have lots of good authors and pastors and preachers who speak about good and healthy marriages, but no one is talking about the bad ones. And so I choose you to be my ambassador. And he led me to a verse in Proverbs 31, 8 and 9, where it says this: speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Ensure justice for those being crushed. Yes, speak up for the poor and helpless and see that they get justice. And so that's what I've been doing. And I find that these verses are right before the verse of the wife of noble character, or the woman of noble character. And since that time, God has used me to speak up all over the world, not just the United States. For example, in Romania, on the behalf of women, in Iraq, helping women and church leaders who work with abused women and those traumatized by the war. And most recently, I was in Cuba to help counselors and church leaders be better equipped to respond to destructive marital problems with wisdom and with truth. Now, before I start, can you let me know how familiar you are with my teaching? That will just help me to see how much you already know. If you're familiar, just say, yep, a little bit, not at all. Just pick one of the categories that are available to you. And that'll give me some framework from where you're at as an audience. All right? So let's get started because I have a lot to share with you. And in full disclosure, an hour together is probably not enough. It's not enough to share everything I would love to teach you on this important topic. In the past couple of days, I have been doing some Facebook Lives. One I did on covert emotional abuse, and the other I did on 3 lies that women believe that keep them stuck in emotionally destructive marriages. So I'm not going to repeat what I said in those Facebook Lives. But if you have found this content interesting by the end, you might want to head over to my Facebook page and rewatch those videos because I think that will be really, really helpful for you. Okay, so let's begin. What does God's word say about the 5 red flags? Because every time we're asking ourselves this question is what's wrong? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with my marriage? And what am I going to do? One more thing before we get started. I do want to tell you that I want to give you 5 specific warning signs that you're in a destructive marriage. But I also want to tell you what you can do because the only person you can change is you. And if it's okay with you at the end, I'm going to help you to continue your growth as well as get some amazing support from me and other women who know what your life's like, because I'm going to share with you about Conquer. Now, some of you already know about Conquer. Conquer is a unique and very special online support group that I started a couple of years ago. And I prayed that God would give me 50 women to join Conquer. However, it's grown so quickly that we only allow new Conquer members twice a year for 1 week during October and 1 week during May. And Conquer is helping women every day to find her voice and develop her courage and center herself in God. But I'll tell you more about that later. But if you are a Conquer person and you just want to give a shout out for how Conquer has ministered to you or what's it been your biggest takeaway from Conquer this last year, put it in the chat line because I'm sure that those who are just new to this video or new to this webinar would really be curious about Conquer. All right, so then we're going to have a Q&A at the end. All right. So some of you are familiar with my work, very familiar. Some of you are somewhat familiar, and some of you are very little familiar. Okay, about 25% are somewhat and very little, and the rest are more familiar and very familiar. Okay, so let's get started. We know something's wrong. You know something's wrong, or you wouldn't be here. You don't know how to put what's happening into words, but you do probably feel it in your body and in your spirit. Maybe your head hurts or your stomach aches. Maybe for you, your knees knocks or your teeth chatter or your heart pounds. For some of you, your blood pressure is rising. Maybe others throw up. And so what I want you to look at is these 5 red flags that will indicate that you are in an emotionally destructive marriage, not just a difficult marriage, not just a disappointing one, but a destructive one. Now, you may experience just one of these red flags, but probably you'll have more than one. But please don't minimize the destructive elements in your marriage if only you experience a few of these red flags. Each one is destructive. And most women experience a combination of all of the 5. So the first one is you feel controlled. You feel controlled. I had a woman named Teresa. Actually, she came with her husband, Bill, into counseling back when I was a counselor in Pennsylvania. And he admitted that he was wrong. What he did was he took her cell phone from her and he threw it in a sink full of soapy water because she broke the rules. The rules were, now Bill set these rules. The rules were that Teresa was not allowed to talk on the phone to her family. Actually, she wasn't allowed to talk on her phone to anyone once Bill got home from work. You see, in Bill's mind, he was the head of their home. And in his desire to protect their marriage time, he said, hey, Teresa, you have lots of time to talk on the phone when you're home during the day. Even though Teresa worked from home, she didn't have children, but she worked from home and Bill was out at work. When he got home, in his mind, this was our time, and our time shouldn't be interrupted by anything else. Now, this was not a decision that Teresa and Bill made together as a couple. This was a decision that Bill made supposedly as the head of the home, telling Teresa that she could not talk to her family or anybody else when he got home. So one day, Teresa got a phone call during dinner, and she saw that it was from her sister, and she thought to herself, my sister knows not to call me now. It must be a family emergency. So as an adult woman, she made a decision. I'm going to answer the phone. And she told Bill, this must be serious. I'm going to pick up the phone. Well, Bill gave her one of those looks, and after their phone conversation, he grabbed her phone and threw it in the sink of soapy water. Now, later in counseling, he said, I know I shouldn't have reacted that way, but Teresa broke the rules. So let me ask you a question. Are there rules in your household that you didn't make as a couple together, but if you broke them, you'd get in trouble? As an adult woman, are you allowed to be yourself? Are you allowed to speak your own mind? Have your own feelings, your own thoughts, your own opinions? Are you allowed to disagree, or does that mean trouble for you? Are you allowed to make choices of your own, like to get a job part-time if you want, or to go to school, or to have friends over, or to visit your family, or even to cut your hair a certain way, or maybe have a Bible study group in your house? Are you allowed to make financial decisions? Can you choose your own clothes to wear, what you can watch or read, who you can talk to? Are these your decisions to make, or is somebody else making them for you? Do you feel like an adult woman in your marriage, or are you feeling more like a child, or sometimes even a slave? Now, for those of you who are listening who come from conservative Christian background and theological positions, this creates a dicey question around the whole headship and submission issues. Does the husband, as the head of his home, as Bill believed, have the right to make decisions about who you are, what you do, what you wear, who you see, who you talk to, how you live your life? Or is that overstepping his bounds biblically as the head of the home? Even if you believe in biblical headship and submission, which I think are theological truths, let's look at it from Jesus' point of view. When we look at biblical submission and headship, and I'm not going to take the time tonight to unpack it all, but when we really look at the definition of headship according to Jesus, he said to his disciples, hey guys, if you want to be the head of my church, this is what it looks like. And then he put on a towel and he got down on his hands and knees, and he washed their dirty feet. So what he was describing as headship was not, hey, you guys get to make all the decisions and tell everybody what to do. He was saying, if you want to be the head, this is what it looks like. You get to lead in servanthood. You get to lead and initiate service to other people. Headship, biblically, does not mean you get your way all the time, or that you get to order people around. In fact, Jesus expressly told his disciples that they were not to be the head that way. And so if your husband is using biblical headship as a means to control you, understand that he is misusing scripture and misusing his position as the head to get his way. And the Bible has a different term for that. It's called selfishness. Now, Jason Meyer, who's the new pastor of Bethlehem Baptist Church in Minneapolis, which is John Piper's former church, he says this about hyperheadship. He says, hyperheadship is a satanic distortion of male leadership, but it can fly under the radar of discernment because it's disguised as strong male leadership. Make no mistake, it's harsh, oppressive, and controlling. In other words, hyperheadship becomes a breeding ground for domestic abuse. The second red flag is that you regularly feel afraid. Perhaps there has been some physical abuse or threats of abuse, raging, broken doors, holes in walls, and that's pretty darn scary to live with day after day. Or maybe he's never hit you or broken things, but there's chronic financial mismanagement, deceit, hiding, manipulation of family funds. You have no idea what back taxes you may owe or how much they are. You live afraid that the IRS or the bank or some other institution will catch up with him and your family will be destitute. Or maybe for you, there are huge questions about your husband's sexual integrity. Maybe you've been told you have a sexually transmitted disease, although he claims it's not from him. You feel scared to trust or be intimate because you don't know where he's been or who he's been with. Or maybe you're afraid because your health is deteriorating. You've been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that's chronic, and it's made you more and more dependent on him. Or the stress of living with him is taking its toll on your mental and emotional health, and you feel depressed and sometimes afraid because you're having thoughts of ending your life. Or maybe you're over-medicating yourself with prescription drugs and alcohol just to cope with staying in this marriage. You're afraid of who you're becoming and what's happening to you in the midst of trying to stay married to this person. The third red flag is that you feel confused. You never know when or if your spouse is really telling you the truth most of the time. You might even feel a little crazy when you thought you had agreed to something and then find out he says, I never said that. I didn't agree to that. Or maybe you thought he told you something, and when you challenge him on something, he said, that never happened. Or you know something is off, way off, but your husband keeps denying it or twisting it around and make you look like the crazy one. I did a webinar on covert abuse, and one of the strategies of a covert abuser is to make you feel a little nuts and to crush your ability to think for yourself. Here are some stages that I see happening in covert abuse. The first stage, or in crazy making, the first stage is disbelief. Like somebody just did something, like they denied reality, or they said something to you that was just outrageous, and you think to yourself, did it really happen this way? Oh, it couldn't have happened. I must be a mad. He didn't really say that. Did he really say that? No, I just must have misheard him. So you're not quite believing what happened. And then if it continues, then you start defending yourself. And you start saying, that's not true. I didn't say that. That's not what I think. That's not how I feel. I don't want to do this. I don't have these thoughts about that. I don't want to have an affair if he's accusing you of being jealous, if he's jealous and he's accusing you of being with someone else, or he's accusing you of, thinking bad thoughts, or he's accusing you of being a bad person. You're saying, that's not who, I'm not selfish. I don't think only of myself, because he's accusing you of things, and you're saying, that's not true. So you start defending yourself. And then there's so much coming at you. You're thinking, I don't know who I am anymore. Maybe I am who he thinks I am. Maybe I have done that. I remember one woman I worked with who she began to doubt her own sanity. Her husband accused her of sexually abusing their children, and she got so confused inside she couldn't even remember that she didn't do it until she got away from him and got better clarity. So the crazy making cycle is somebody accuses you or attacks you in subtle ways, and you say, wow, is it me? What am I doing wrong? Which is a normal self-reflective question that normal people do. And then you say, no, I didn't do that. That's not me. That's not who I am. And then you start doubting that. Is that who I am? Am I really that selfish? Am I really being manipulative? And often in covert abuse, where you get this confusion, they manipulate you into not trusting your own thoughts and feelings. And that's where it starts to feel very confusing. Don't minimize these seemingly lesser types of controlling behavior. I liken it to 1,000 bee stings. If you get one bee sting, unless you're allergic, you'll be fine. But 1,000 bee stings, over time, it becomes destructive, not only to the health of your marriage, but also to you who's getting repeatedly stung. The fourth red flag is you feel regularly disrespected, demeaned, or dismissed. Your priorities, your feelings, your thoughts, your goals, what you need, what you want, don't really matter. You're put down, invalidated, verbally battered, and emotionally exploited. You exist to serve him and make him and your children's lives work, but there's little concern for your welfare or your happiness. And the last red flag is you feel objectified. There isn't a you in the marriage. You are simply a role. You're the wife, you're the maid, you're the mom, you're the provider, or you're the sexual object. You exist solely to meet the need of the other person. In other words, you feel like a body to use, not a person who's loved. Who you are, what you need, how you feel, what you think or want doesn't matter to your husband. What matters is you fulfilling your role and meeting his needs and his preferences. And when you step out of line and want something for yourself, there is a price to pay. As long as you perform your role, your duties, things are good. And that's all that's wanted or needed from you. Now, let me ask you a question. Right now, if you and me privately could just sit down and have a cup of coffee or an ice cream, what are you seeing right now about your marriage? And what are you seeing right now about yourself? Where are you right now? And what would you say is your biggest challenge in the marriage that you're in right now? Now, I would love for you to be honest with me and type your responses. I'm not going to show them to anyone else, but I'm going to be able to see them so that I can hopefully develop some future classes on what some of your challenges are. Facebook Lives, blog posts, and other courses that I might offer. Now, let me just switch gears for a minute, because another way of discerning the health or dysfunction of your marriage is to look at the elements of a healthy marriage. So many of us have grown up in unhealthy homes. We don't even know what healthy looks like. And so let me just give you some descriptors, because a healthy marriage is not a perfect marriage, but a loving partnership. It is not a slave, master, or parent-child relationship. And in a healthy marriage, you still have conflict. But conflict involves solving a problem, not attacking a person. And damages, when they're there, and every healthy marriage has some damages, they're not ignored, but they're repaired through confession, restitution, and real change. You see, all marriages have sinful interactions at times. However, when you realize, or your partner realizes, that you've done something wrong, when you see the pain on your spouse's face, or the fear in their eyes, or the bruise on their body, whatever it is, or they tell you again and again and again, something's bothering them. In a healthy marriage, you don't ignore that. You don't keep doing the same wrong thing over and over again. You listen, you stop, you change. You realize that you've crossed the line. You realize that you've done damage to your partner and to your marriage, and that damage can't be ignored or minimized or pushed off as no big deal or something that your spouse caused you to do. Instead, in a healthy marriage with a healthy person, you own it and you take responsibilities and you make repairs. So let's quickly go over the ingredients necessary for any successful relationship. And they are mutuality, reciprocity, and freedom. Mutuality means that there is mutual ingredients that go into making the relationship work, like mutual caring and mutual honesty, mutual respect, mutual responsibility for the care and maintenance of the relationship, and mutual repentance when things go wrong. Tim Keller, a well-known pastor in Redeemer Church in New York City, wrote this on his book on marriage. He said this: "The Christian teaching on marriage does not offer a choice between fulfillment and sacrifice, but rather mutual fulfillment through mutual sacrifice." If you don't have mutuality in a relationship, in any relationship, you might have a relationship, but it's called more like a ministry. And ministry relationships are important. You're the one who's giving, you're the one who's caring, you're the one who's, being honest, you're the one who's being responsible, and the other person may not be. But it's not a healthy relationship. It's a ministry relationship, and it's perfectly fine. But don't marry somebody you're in a ministry relationship, because it can get old and tiring very quickly. The second ingredient is reciprocity. And what I mean by reciprocity in a healthy relationship, it means that power and responsibility are shared. For example, the rules and the responsibilities aren't just made by Bill and Teresa doesn't get a say, but they're made by both and applied to both, not just to one person. And there's a lack of reciprocity when I make the rules and I expect you to respect me, but I don't respect you. Or I expect you to be careful with the finances and give me all the receipts, but I don't do the same for you. Or I expect you to call me and tell me when you're going to be late and where you are, but I don't have to do that for you. The Apostle Paul talks a lot about mutuality and reciprocity in marriage. In fact, in a society in the New Testament where there was a lack of fairness and there was a lack of reciprocity and mutuality in marriage, where women didn't have a say and they didn't have many rights, and it was a very patriarchal society, Paul addressed that a lot in his writing. And here's a place where he addressed a church that was sacrificially giving to meet the needs of another church. And here's what he says about reciprocity. He says in 2 Corinthians 8, "For I do not mean that others should be eased and you burdened, but that as a matter of fairness, your abundance at the present time should supply their need, so that their abundance may supply your need, so that there may be fairness." What Paul is saying is that even a relationship between churches has to be reciprocal. It's not just one person giving, the other person taking. That is not a healthy relationship, even in the church, even among churches, but especially among people. There's a give and a take, and power and responsibility are shared. And the last really important ingredient is freedom. A healthy relationship, especially marriage, allows the people in the relationship to be who God called them to be able to share their feelings, to disagree without feeling afraid, to make decisions without having a price to pay. So in summary, a healthy adult relationship is one where both people in the relationship give and both people in the relationship receive. There's a safe and open exchange of ideas, feelings, thoughts, and all perspectives are considered and valued. And there's also the freedom to respectfully challenge, confront, and strengthen one another. On the other hand, an emotionally destructive marriage is one in where one's personhood, dignity, and freedom of choice is regularly denied, criticized, or crushed. This can be done through words, behaviors, economics, attitudes, as well as misusing the scriptures. Now, if you want to have more information on whether or not you're in a destructive marriage, I've put a link up here that you can take a free test. It's at the end of the first chapter of my book on the emotionally destructive marriage. But if you don't have that book, go to this link. It's leslievernick.com/the-emotionally-destructive-marriage/assessment. Okay. And that will give you the test. And then you can just take it online and it will give you a score of where in those areas are the most destructive elements in your marriage. So when the line is crossed and crossed and crossed and crossed, what makes that marriage unable to be repaired? What makes a marriage unable to heal? Well, it's not our brokenness, because if that were true, any one of our marriages would be destructive because we all sin, and we sometimes sin in big ways. It's that unwillingness to see it. It's unwillingness to confess it. It's unwillingness to take responsibility for it and get the help we need to change it. One of the very biggest lies that I think that women are told is that you need to just stay no matter what because unconditional love means unconditional relationship. But that's not true. The Bible tells us that unacknowledged and unrepentant sin separates us from God and from one another. That's why Jesus tells us in Matthew 18 that when someone sins against you, go to them so that you can repair that relationship. That's why God says that my sin separates me from you. And we have to go to God and in confession and repentance to renew that relationship or even to begin a relationship with God. And so unconditional love is called for, but it does not require unconditional relationship. God himself doesn't give unconditional relationship to everyone. And so when Jesus tells you to love your enemy, he's not saying you have to have a relationship with the enemy or even be close to him, precisely because they are your enemy. They have hurt you. But having love for your enemy keeps you from becoming just like your enemy. It helps you to keep compassionate and empathic without enabling. But that doesn't mean you can continue to have a relationship with someone who continues to sin against you without changing. Now, I often hear from women that their counselor or their pastor says, oh, let's not talk about emotional abuse. That word is so trendy. Or you know what? The Bible doesn't say anything about emotional abuse, so we're not going to validate that. But I want to tell you that's not true. The Bible does speak about abuse, and so I'm going to give you some places where it does. Proverbs is a huge place where the Bible talks a lot about emotional abuse. For example, Proverbs 11:9 says, with their what? Words, the godless what? Destroy their friends. That's pretty powerful. Or reckless words pierce like a sword. Now, just these two verses alone shatter that old nursery rhyme that we sang as kids. You know, the one sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. It's not true. It's not even in the Bible. The Bible tells us that words do hurt us and that we are not to use our words to hurt other people. For example, Proverbs also says life and death is in the power of the tongue. In Galatians, it tells us if you're always biting and devouring each other with your words, watch out. You will destroy each other. And in Ephesians and Colossians, Paul says, get rid of all bitterness and rage and anger, harsh words, slander, as well as every kind of evil behavior. Or Colossians says, and also dirty language. James says it perhaps most powerfully. He's telling Christians, no one can tame the tongue. It's restless and evil, full of deadly poison. Sometimes it praises our Lord and Father, and sometimes it curses those who have been made in the image of God. And so blessing and cursing come pouring out of the same mouth. Surely, my brothers and sisters, this is not right. But let's look at some of the effects of emotional abuse that the Bible talks about. Because emotional abuse is real. Your spirit is becoming crushed. You feel drained, depleted, totally unloved. And this is from a person who promised to love you. And we might think that the Bible doesn't really talk about the effects of emotional abuse, but it does. For example, Psalm 52 says this, your tongue cuts like a sharp razor. You're an expert at telling lies. You love evil more than good and lies more than truth. You love to destroy others with your what? Words, you liar. How about this one? Psalm 55. Please listen and answer me, for I am overwhelmed by my troubles. My heart pounds in my chest. The terror of death assaults me. Fear and trembling overwhelm me, and I can't stop shaking. So in those verses, he's describing a panic attack, an anxiety attack. Now listen to why. It's not an enemy who taunts me. Okay, he's being taunted. I could bear that. It's not my foes who so arrogantly insult me. This is emotional abuse. I could have hidden from them. Instead, it is you, my equal, my companion, my close friend. And how about this one? Their insults have broken my heart, and I am in despair. Maybe that's exactly how you feel, because emotional abuse systematically degrades, diminishes, and can eventually destroy you. Studies show that 1 in 4 Christian women report being in an emotionally destructive marriage. Is this you? Is this you? Daniel Goleman, a social scientist, says this: when someone dumps their toxic feelings on us, explodes in anger or threats, shows disgust or contempt, they activate in us a circuitry for the very same distressing emotions. Friend, that's why you need help and support, so that you don't become, in the midst of your destructive marriage, like the very thing that you hate. The Bible tells us that bad company corrupts good morals. And anger, and when you hang out with angry people, you become an angry person yourself. When we're around emotionally abusive people, it either crushes us or it makes us behave just like them. And this is not God's plan for you, because the consequences of living in an emotionally destructive marriage are not just physical and emotional. They're also mental, relational, spiritual, and generational. How many of you are seeing the negative effects on your kids of living in this kind of marriage? The Bible warns us that the sins of the father are passed on down to the next generation. So, what's next? What can you do? There seems to be 2 choices given to Christian women these days. First, how many of you have heard, try harder? Just try harder, honey. Try to make him happy. Try harder to respect him more. That's what he needs. Try harder to pray for him. Give him more sex. That'll stop the pornography problem. Try harder to submit. Try harder to not push his buttons. Try harder to keep everything calm at home. Try harder not to bother him so much. You're so exhausted from trying harder. And you know what? It doesn't work. The second answer that typically Christian women are told is that, you know what? Yeah, I hear you. And you know what? God is calling you to suffer for Jesus. That you're going to suffer in this marriage and God is going to honor your suffering. How many of you have heard that? So let's just unpack this a bit. What's wrong with trying harder? It might work in some marriages that are not destructive. When you do something and you work a little harder at forgiving, or you work a little harder at trying to, bless your partner, it begets a reciprocal response. But remember, this isn't a healthy relationship. There isn't reciprocity, right? And so when trying harder, when you're given that advice, it feeds 3 very powerful lies. The first lie is it gives you false hope, especially when it's given to you by a people helper like a pastor or a Christian counselor. Oh, they must know if I try harder, I will be able to fix this. I will be able to stop him from treating me this way. I will be able to control his temper, his mood, his acting out. It's not true. Jesus, who was perfect, couldn't stop Judas from doing what Judas did. No matter how hard you try and no matter what you do, you don't have the power to change or control someone else's choices. Those are his to change and control. So when you do all these things and you are deluded into thinking, if I do this, then I can fix this, it feeds a lie that somehow you have the power to change another person. And you do not. That doesn't mean you can't pray for them, but you can't control them. No matter what you do, it may influence him some, and I hope it does, but it doesn't necessarily change him. He has to decide to change. And so when you're given that advice and you believe it, you think, okay, if I do this, then this is going to happen. And when it doesn't, so many women become so disillusioned with biblical principles and with godly advice because they're saying, I've been there, done that, and it doesn't work. My husband left me for another woman, or he's still into pornography, or he's sexually addicted, or he's drug addicted, or he's continuing to be abusive. Nothing changes. And that's why, because it feeds a second lie. And the lie is that if you keep trying harder, it gives him the impression that you agree with him, that you're the problem here. How many of you have husbands who continually blame you for the way they behave? Well, the reason I yelled at you is because you talked back to me. The reason I hit you is because you didn't have dinner on time. The reason I acted this way is because the kids didn't pick up their toys. It's always someone else's fault for how he behaves. Now, don't get me wrong, we can provoke people and they can feel certain feelings, but how they choose to handle their feelings, if they choose to express themselves with abuse and control and manipulation, is their decision. You can't make someone do that, but it gives him the impression that it is your fault because you keep trying harder to not bug him or not push his buttons so that he'll do it differently. He can keep raising the bar that somehow you have to be a perfect wife, which then reinforces his entitlement, that he's entitled to a perfect wife who never disappoints him, who never upsets him, who always is happy to see him and always wants to have sex with him, no matter how he treats her. And he never has to experience any consequences of his behavior because you just bounce back with a smiling face with no problem. How many of you live in that kind of expectation? You can't do it because there is no such marriage like that. That's a fantasy marriage. It's unrealistic. We all live with a broken person who sins. And if someone can't take ownership of their own sin and you're supposed to be perfect, there's no way you can live up to that. What's wrong with the whole idea of suffering for Jesus? We're going to unpack that just a little bit. But there's some, I'm going to be sending you a follow-up video on the whole topic of that passage in 1 Peter 3 that women are told to, it says to, win them over with silence. And we'll unpack that for you in the video that comes because I didn't have enough time to put that in the webinar here. So be sure to click that on when you get it tomorrow or the next day. But it's really important that you understand that if we suffer, which is okay, it's a good virtue, suffering and sacrifice is a good biblical virtue. But if you're going to choose to suffer for something that brings about someone else's good. Don't suffer to enable someone to continue sin. That's not wise suffering. That's foolishness. In fact, Oswald Chambers says, never choose suffering. Nobody would in their right mind would choose suffering. Choose God's will. And if that involves suffering, then so be it. But that's a whole different thing. And we're going to talk about what God's will is in a minute. So what I want to do now is show you 5 things that you can do right now. You must do if you want to get healthy in your emotionally destructive marriage. And the first thing I want you to do is prioritize safety. Prioritize safety. The Bible tells us the prudent see danger and take refuge. And sometimes we feel guilty, like, oh, I should keep my marriage together at all costs, at any price, including my own safety. And that's not what God says. I don't believe he says. Your safety is important to God. Yes, your marriage is important to God too. So what's more important? Is it more important for you to stay married and be totally battered and broken? Or for you to say, hey, my safety is important here. And if he doesn't change his behaviors, maybe God doesn't value my marriage higher than my safety. And let's just take a look at this biblically with a couple of other examples. For example, we know in the 10 Commandments that God values telling the truth, right? Thou shalt not lie is one of the 10 Commandments. And yet in the Old Testament, when Rahab, the prostitute, lied to keep the Jewish spies who were scouting out the promised land. She said they went that way when they were hiding over that way. But she didn't want them to get captured. And so she lied about where they went. She lied to protect their what? Safety. God commended her. He saved her life. She married a Jewish man. She's in the lineage of Christ and she's in the Hebrews Hall of Fame. Rahab did the right thing. And even when baby Jesus was being sought after by King Herod, the Bible says that we're to honor the authorities and obey the authorities over us. But the authority was wicked. It was King Herod. And he wanted to kill all the babies under the age of 2 because he didn't get the wise man's, description of where Jesus was. And so he didn't know where he was. So he wanted to slaughter all these babies. And God woke Joseph up in a dream. And he didn't say to Joseph, just trust me and suffer that, be willing to suffer, that I'll take care of you. But I wanted you to honor Herod and obey him. He said, flee. You're in danger. Flee. And so we know that God cares about safety. And I also want you to know, for those of you who aren't worried about your physical safety, at least not yet, I'm talking about other safety too. Like, what about your financial safety? Your sexual safety? Your emotional and mental and spiritual safety? I know you've heard God hates divorce. But let's be clear on what God hates. This is the verse that is quoted, Malachi 2:16. This is the New International Version of this verse. This is what God hates. Let's read it. God hates a man who hates and divorces his wife, says the Lord God of Israel. One who does violence to the one he should protect. That's what God hates. He hates this kind of reckless, treacherous divorce. And one who does violence to the one he should protect. God isn't hating all kinds of divorce. He's hating this kind of divorce. And he hates this kind of marriage. That sounds a whole lot different than God hates every kind of divorce. Let's also look at what else God hates. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift to running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among the brethren. So it brings us to a question. Does Jesus value the sanctity of marriage above the safety and sanity in that marriage? I don't think so. And let me ask you another question. Do you think it glorifies God? If we think about what is God's will, should I suffer? Does it glorify God for you to become a martyr and suffer for Jesus in order to enable your destructive spouse to continue to sin against you and your children without any consequences? I don't think so. Now, you might not hear this from other people, so you might be thinking, oh my gosh, Leslie Vernick, she's an advocate for divorce. But nothing could be further from the truth. I'm not an advocate for divorce, but what I'm an advocate for is healthy marriages and healthy families. I'm an advocate for truth and goodness and righteousness in marriage. I'm an advocate for promoting the biblical ideal that marriage is to represent a powerful picture of Christ and his bride. And when that marriage actually displays the opposite of oppressor and oppressed, that marriage does not glorify God, nor is it healthy or good. And the first goal is not divorce, but to heal that marriage, to restore that marriage to its rightful place. But if that doesn't work, you do have other biblical options, and I want to share with you what those are. And I want to give you some extra things you can do. First, you're going to prioritize safety. But second, you're going to put your marriage in its proper place. Now, it bothers me as a Christian counselor that so many women, when they're going to their church, are kind of given this advice that you're to put your marriage and your man and your number one priority. You need to do all you can to make this work, to keep your marriage together, make it your number one goal. And I would say that's bad advice. I'm going to tell you something different. You must put your marriage in its proper place. And that means you're not going to make it your number one priority. You're not going to make it number one in your life. Because as Christian women, we have been taught wrongly to be husband-centered women or marriage-centered women. And we see that as good and right, but it's not. It's idolatry. Instead, we're to become God-centered women, not husband-centered women, and not marriage-centered women. One woman said, the only thing I did different is follow God first. I was being shown that my unhealthy attachment to my husband was idolatry. I began to repent of that and prayed that he be broken, knowing full well that it might mean the end of our marriage. If you become a God-centered woman instead of a husband or a marriage-centered woman, you will immediately begin to get some instant clarity about what's true and good and right. And that will help you clarify your role. Because if you want to be a godly woman, and I hope you do, you're to love your husband. And your biblical role as his helpmate is unique, not for any other person to do because you're his wife. But it's not to prop him up in order to enable him to continue to sin more. Your role is much more risky and redemptive than that. So let's look at this whole idea. If you're going to love your husband well, what does that look like? You know, biblical love is sacrificial and it may involve suffering, but biblical love, unconditional love, is always committed to the well-being of the other person. So let me ask you a question. What is in the best interest of your husband right now? What is in the best interest of him? Is it to collude with his delusion that he's entitled to the perks of a great marriage while all he sows in that marriage are weeds? You see, It's in his best interest to wake up, to repent, to change and stop his destructive ways. It's in his best interest. It's in your best interest. It's in your children's best interest. It's in your marriage's best interest. And so you may be called to love him in a way that no one else will by speaking the truth to him, not by propping him up and enabling him to stay blind. You see, when you put God first and you put your marriage in its proper place, you can learn to let go of the outcome, a good marriage. Here's a woman from Concord who said, I can be a godly person. A godly what? That I can do. I can't make a good marriage all by myself. So how does a godly woman handle a destructive person? Does she enable it, or does she speak up about it? Ephesians 5 tells us, do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. Now that may be tough for some of you, but you do your husband and your marriage and family no favors by keeping all the destructiveness secret. The Bible says it needs the light, and the darkness hates the light. The third thing that you need to do if you're going to get healthier is begin to identify the lies that you believe that keeps you stuck. And we did a Facebook Live about that a couple of days ago, but you begin to learn what's true. And let me just give you a couple of the lies that maybe you've been told and you believe. One is if he doesn't hit you, it is an abuse. We've already tackled that in this webinar. Or there's no such thing as emotional abuse in the Bible. That's not true. We've talked about this in the webinar. You are both sinners, so stop judging his sin as worse than yours. You are both sinners, but when someone is doing some things that are destructive to you, your children, and your marriage, you must not judge, but you must speak the truth about it. Or God hates divorce more than he hates abuse. You know that's not true. Now, we've already tackled some of these others that you believe in this webinar, but these are others that you must need to work on. Like, it must be something I'm doing. It's all my fault he acts this way. If only I try harder, he will change. God wants me to stay no matter what. If I leave, God will punish me. I hope you've seen that these lies are lies. They're not true, but many of you have lived as if they're true. And you know, the Lord tells us that we're transformed. How? By the renewing of our mind. It's better for the children for me to stay. Is it? How many of you would say it's better for your children to stay and you've lived through it and your children are grown? Was it better for your children that you stayed? Or do you wish you would have left now? Or I can't live alone. I'm too afraid. If only I could get through to him, he'd be a great person. No one else would want me. I don't deserve to be treated better. There must be something wrong with me that he would treat me this way, especially when he treats everyone else so wonderful. This is normal. I don't know any different. Or how about this one? I must suffer for Christ. So when God tells us our transformation comes about by renewing our mind, what do we renew our mind with? We renew it with the truth, according to Romans 12:2. And here's what the Lord tells us in Psalm 107:20, because the truth sets us free. Jesus tells us the truth sets us free. He sent out his word and healed them. And what? Delivered them from their destruction. It's crucial, friend, if you want to get healthy, that you learn to think differently. And one of the ways that I teach women to think in our group of Conquer is I teach them to think like an owner instead of a victim. Now, hear me. When I say that, I'm not saying that you haven't been victimized. You probably have. But if you want to stop being a victim or being re-victimized again and again and again, it starts with you, and you have to start learning to think differently. Because even in horrible situations, like a victim of a rape or a robbery or injustice or tragedy, can and must, if they want to change things, begin to think like an owner. For example, they begin to ask themselves, what can I learn from this experience? Or how can I grow from this, not just get through it? Or what do I need to change to get stronger and saner and healthier and better protect myself? So, for example, owners determine how to respond, where victims just react to life circumstances. Owners begin to decide, how am I going to let this shape me? What kind of person am I going to grow as a result of this? Or victims just allow life to determine the kind of person she becomes. Owners shape circumstances. They begin to do new things to create new outcomes. Victims allow circumstances to shape them, and they feel helpless to change. Owners are problem solvers who take action and strategize. Victims or victim thinkers feel helpless and stuck. This is what you need to do if you're going to change. And lastly, educate yourself on healthy and unhealthy patterns. You may have grown up with this idea that this is normal, or it's normal for me, but it's not healthy. It's not good. And I hope by now you don't want to pass generational unhealthiness and destructiveness down to your children. But knowledge is power. And the biggest fear that many of you have is that your kids' lives will be damaged if you leave. But we also have to recognize that they may be damaged if you stay. What are they learning is normal? They're learning how a man treats a woman. They're learning how a woman handles being treated that way. Those of you on this webinar, if you have grown-up kids, I want you to answer a question for me. Now that you've seen the effects on your kids, was it better that you stayed? Or do you wish you would have left? Help those who are struggling with this question right now. I don't know what you're going to say, so I'm just going to leave it to the chat. But those of you who've got grown kids and you see the effects of what happened by staying, do you wish you would have left earlier? Put your answer in the chat box so other women who are wondering this can learn from your experience. The Apostle Paul tells us that we're not to be overcome by evil, but to overcome evil with good. So let me tell you one more thing that you can do. Build your core strength. Now, I'm not going to have time to unpack this tonight. I teach a whole class on this. But with working with women in Conquer, as well as in my other small groups, I help them to be developing core, internal core. In other words, they're going to be committed, to truth, no more pretending, no more faking it, no more acting like everything's fine when it's not. They're going to be open to learn and grow and change. That's why you're here. You're already open to that. You're going to start to take responsibility for yourself and not continue to allow yourself to be a victim. And you're going to be respectful toward others without dishonoring yourself. And you're going to be empathic and compassionate. You're not going to lose love in order to be able to set boundaries, but you're going to learn to set boundaries so that you don't have to continue to enable destructive behavior in your marriage and in your life. This core strength is extremely important because otherwise the Bible tells us bad company corrupts good morals. And sometimes abusive and destructive relationships begin to turn you into the very person you don't like anymore. So far, we're about to close up, but what has been your aha moment? What is the biggest thing that you thought, wow, I wish I'd known that before? Or wow, I never heard that before. Or wow, I've got to put this into practice. I've got to change this. So imagine for a minute with me how you would feel if in the next 6 months you could change and you could learn to speak the truth in love. You could learn to take responsibility for yourself while being respectful toward your husband. That you would recognize destructive patterns and respond to them in a firm yet godly way. That you knew how to establish boundaries and consequences and stick with them. I bet you'd feel empowered. I feel strong and capable, not so broken anymore, not so helpless or scared. So far we've talked about getting safe, which is your first priority. Put your marriage in its proper place. Identify the lies you believe. Learn to think like an owner and not a victim. And last but not least, it's really important that you get some support because I find that abused women are so isolated because they feel alone, they feel defective, and they feel embarrassed about their situation. And they need to share and process what's going on. And research on trauma now is best handled with group support, with other people who know what you've been through and what your life is like. A group can help you face your fears, find your voice, and strategize about how to speak up, when to speak up to your church leaders, to your Christian counselor, and to your husband who may have ignored what's going on for a long time. Friend, I want you to know it's not enough just to know the truth. You have to learn to walk in it, even when it's painful, even when it's hard, especially when you're scared to do it. And we all need support of godly others who will help us walk in truth. You need people who don't question your validity of the story that you're sharing, or clobber you with Bible verses about how God hates divorce, or just turn the cheek one more time. You need people who care and are compassionate, but are also strong and biblically wise to give you a little nudge now and then so you don't get stuck in your anger or pain and you keep moving forward to greater growth, maturity, and godliness. But I also know that everyone who needs that extra support can't afford to go to counseling or even get one-on-one coaching with someone. But I would love the opportunity to continue our work together. And let me just share a minute how that can happen. Conquer is an educational support group. It's totally online, so you can join from anywhere in the world. And Conquer will help you hear from God in a new way. Conquer will help you live from a place of strength and health and not frozen desperation. Conquer will help you get stronger and more confident to stop being victimized again and again and protect your children. It'll help you steer clear of manipulative games and crazy-making conversations, as well as gain the freedom from bitterness and resentment that so many of us get stuck in when we've been hurt again and again and again. It'll also help you to learn how to make good choices and follow through with those choices. It'll teach you how to discover your own voice and express it to your husband honestly, yet respectfully. And the courage to say, I won't live like this anymore. Sound amazing? Well, it really is. And I hope through this short webinar that you have learned that the wisdom that God has is different than perhaps you thought, and that God has rich truths to tell you on how to deal with this destructive marriage in a way that doesn't make you feel like that you have no choices and no voice in that, but that God wants to shape your voice and your choices to not only glorify Him, but give your husband the best chance to potentially wake up from his own destructive behavior. Here are some testimonials or some comments from women who have been in Conquer for a while. Shelley says this: today I'm no longer that wounded woman in a withering relationship thanks to Conquer and all the work of the Holy Spirit. I was wonderfully made and I'm wonderfully restored, and so was my marriage, though both are works in progress. I am a woman of worth, a warrior. How would you like to be called a warrior and better equipped for emotional and spiritual battle in this world? I am not crushed by my fears. I conquer my fears. I'm not defeated by my circumstances. I am victorious because I've learned to conquer, not cower. Or Lori says, Conquer has really helped me as I've been separated from my husband since August 2014. I've struggled with guilt that I couldn't work on my issues very well by living with him. But I realized that sometimes we have to step away to see the picture clearer. I am seeing myself clearer and what I need to work on. Thanks for the teaching. And Wanda said, this group has been a blessing from God at the worst time in my life. The support has been phenomenal from women who truly understand what you're going through. The fact that Leslie even responds to Facebook posts is amazing. The monthly calls have been tremendous help to me. And now there's a second call. These phone calls are truly a wonderful coaching sessions. And I feel that Leslie's wisdom, compassion, and Christian heart is displayed on each phone call. I'm thankful she's made all this available, no matter where you live. So let me tell you if Conquer will work for you. It's a perfect fit if you are a woman. Sorry, no guys allowed. Conquer is a woman's group, and it's going to stay a women's group. If you're sick and tired of feeling stuck and feeling helpless, you don't like who you're becoming in your destructive marriage, you're ready for yourself to grow and become all that God has for you, and you're ready to invest in yourself for a change. One of the things about Conquer is we're really helping you to get stronger, not helping you to help your husband, but helping you to be who you're supposed to be. And I believe if you become the woman God's called you to be, that's the best hope that you have of waking your husband up. And Conquer will give you just the continued small bite learning environment I talked about. You see, Conquer is different than other groups. I'm not going to give you the canned answer you've heard over and over and over again. I think you've gotten a taste of that tonight. I'm going to give you some powerful, biblical, clear teaching, but in small learning bites. You know, you can read a book, but you never put it into practice. You can listen to a webinar like this, but you never actually take the steps. And I want to teach you step by step how to form healthy relationships, how to stop over-functioning or under-functioning in your life, how to be less dependent, and develop the strength to say no when you need to, without cowering under the fear that someone might be disappointed or angry with you. Conquer is an opportunity for you and I to regularly connect through video, through a private support group, and by telephone each month so that you can gain clarity, confidence, courage, as well as practical tools to move beyond frozen and move beyond stuck and into freedom. Margaret Wheatley says this. She says, without reflection, we go blindly on our way, creating more unintended consequences and failing to achieve anything useful. So as we close, it's time for you to reflect. How are things going for you? Are you making the changes that you want to make? Are you different than you were last year, or are you worse? Listen to some other women who have spent some time in Conquer. It's so helpful to know that there are so many others sharing our experiences, not exactly, but similarly, and it helps give me the courage some days to face another day. Also, the resources available through the knowledge and experiences of others on this site is absolutely priceless. When one doesn't know which way to turn, others do. And the prayer support and focus on doing the right thing, even though it's hard or scary, is incredible. I am so grateful for this place to share my frustrations and to help and encourage others. Or how about from Pamela? Such helpful, sweet counsel. Wherever the Spirit of God is, there's liberty. And that's what I hear Leslie talking about in this one, the freedom to be a human being who needs God. What she says draws me to what Jesus has done. What a relief. It lifts up the cross in my mind, drawing me toward the freedom of the Christian life, of yieldedness instead of the temptation to try to remain in control and become my own judge. Or Lori, I love your biblical teaching in all aspects, but the thing I appreciate about you most is when listening to you speak with others. Your amazing ability to respond to any conflict with a toxic person in such an effective yet compassionate and loving way, regardless of the circumstances. I'm so impressed with your choice of vocabulary, as it seems that you always know exactly what to say to help a woman to stand up for herself in the midst of conflict while showing compassion and grace for the destructive individual. This is different teaching than you will hear anywhere else, because I don't want you to become a bully back. I don't want you to become hard-hearted and reactive and just spew back words back to your spouse. That's not God's way. But he does call you to respond with strength and dignity, and I want to teach you how. So in Conquer, what you get each month are 2 short video teachings, about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, usually max, each month. Like this month, we had Conquer Loneliness. We've had Conquer Unworthiness. We've had Conquer Boundaries. We've had Conquer Post-Traumatic Stress, all different kinds of things, topics that will be short. Conquer Trauma Bonds. If they're too long to put in one Conquer, I'll just do the next one, the same topic with more information. You'll have a short video teaching that you can just turn on for 10 minutes, take the handout out, write some notes to yourself, and immediately start putting into practice what you're learning. And each month, next step, the next step, the next step. In addition to those videos, you have a whole video library of 2 years worth of videos of other Conquer videos that you can listen to. 2 90-minute group phone calls every month, one during the day on a Monday and one in the evening on a Tuesday. And these video calls are recorded. And so you can listen to them again and again. This is what the person was talking about. We do role play. Sometimes I'll say, okay, to someone, what did your husband say? What did you say? Let's practice saying it differently. And so you'll get those and they're recorded. And you can listen to these phone calls every month. You can be a part, or if you can't be there, you can listen to the recording. There's also a secret Facebook page to connect with other women, especially women in your region, whether it's the East Coast or Midwest. And so you get support, and perhaps you can even meet up, as some of the Conquer women are beginning to do. Help in setting this up is available if you don't know how to do Facebook. You also get reduced prices on other programs and classes, and we're going to have a 2018 Conquer Conference, and you will get a reduced price to attend, where you can meet other women who know what your life is like, as well as get some amazing, amazing worship and training and teaching. So if you're computer challenged like I am, I want to help you understand, because I'm techie. And so immediately I'm thinking, oh, I don't know, I can do this. And so I just want to tell you, if you're like me, let me help you see what that looks like. So when you join Conquer, you get access to this page. It says, welcome to Leslie's Relationship Lab. And see right there where that arrow is, it says log in to gain access. So you're just going to use a username, make one up, or you can use your real name. No one else sees this but you. And then you're going to put a password in there, and that will give you a login access right to Conquer. Then what's going to happen next is, once you press that, then you're going to see that arrow where it says Conquer Program. You just click on there, and it gives you it opens a door, and it gives you access to all kinds of videos and recordings. And here's where they're housed. The one on the left will say, if you want to see the current Conquer video for this month, or let's say you want to kind of do some homework and you want to go to the video library and look at all the archives of the last 2 years of different video training. You want to learn about boundaries, or you want to learn about post-traumatic stress, or you want to learn about codependency, or whatever it is that you might be interested in. They're all cataloged, and you can go back and watch as many or as few as you want to, as much as you need to be educated. And so it's real simple to navigate, and there's all kinds of support that people will give you in Conquer. Martha and JL are my assistants, and they're really available to you to help you. Conquer gives you the ability to live from a place of emotional and spiritual health instead of a place of desperation, fear, or clinginess to any kind of love, even when it's toxic. It will give you a community of godly, like-minded women who get you and know what challenges you face, and who will support and pray for you. It'll give you confidence that you know without a shadow of a doubt that God doesn't value the sanctity of marriage more than your safety or sanity. And prayer support night and day. Since we have Conquer women from all over the country, when you get on Facebook at 3 o'clock in the morning, you say, I can't sleep and I just had a terrible fight with my husband, please pray for me. About 3:05, you're going to get about 5 other women who say, I can't sleep either, or I'm on the other side of the world and my time is 3 in the afternoon. I will pray for you right now. There's an amazing amount of prayer support on this group, and this is priceless. You can't pay for someone to pray for you. It's a gift, but it is amazing prayer support, and I have so appreciated the prayer support that's come my way, and I know that some people have gotten through some very difficult situations with the women on Conquer who pray for them. And also the freedom from the cycle that you're in of just lashing out and reacting to being provoked. I want you to stop feeling bad about yourself, but I want you to start doing it different. I want you to gain some greater peace of mind so that you're no longer feeling so alone, unstable, confused, sad, depressed, or angry so much of the time. And I want to give you real solid biblical information and truth on how to make good choices for yourself and follow through with those choices. So now what? Well, you get to decide. Here are your choices. You can do nothing, which you've heard the definition of craziness. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for different results. If you do what you've always done, you probably get what you've always gotten. And is that okay with you? I hope not. I hope it's not okay with you now. The second thing is you can kind of go it alone. You can read books, you can educate yourself and hope for the best, or you can let me and the other women of Conquer help you, that you will get the value of community and support, as well as some brand new teaching that you've just not heard before, and new tools on your relational tool belt. And because I am so committed to you getting the help that you need, I am giving away 10 full 1-year scholarships to Conquer. I want you to join Conquer, even if you can't afford it. And it's not expensive. But if you need a scholarship to Conquer, I want you to email me or Martha at leslievernick.com, and just send us a little story about how you believe Conquer will help you and why the cost is a hardship for you. Conquer is a monthly membership of $27 a month. If you prefer, you can join for a whole year and you get 2 months free. And you can cancel anytime. So try it for 30 days, for goodness sake. You have absolutely no risk. You pay $27 a month, or you join for the year and you don't have to worry about it for a whole another year. And you can get access to this amazing community, as well as time with me once a month or twice a month on the phone. There's no contract. You just join, and if any time it's not for you, or you're not thinking it's of value for you, or something else comes up and you can't be a part of Conquer anymore, you just quit. And for those of you who joined tonight, we have a special bonus for you. Only for new members who sign up during this webinar, you will receive an extra 2-hour phone call this month. So we've already had our first phone call this month, last Monday. We're going to have our second phone call in Conquer on Tuesday evening's Halloween this year. So we're going to do it on Monday evening. But all of you newbies, I'm going to do a 2-hour phone call with you next Thursday night at 7 Eastern time till 9. And all of you can ask all of your questions. I can get to know you before you get caught in the bigger group of Conquer. I can get to know you, get to know a little bit about your story. The phone call, if you can't make it, will be recorded, but it's just going to be for new members. And so details will follow for those of you who sign up for tonight. That will be the bonus for those of you who sign up to get you oriented and get connected real quickly with other new members who know what your life is like. Now, Conquer is going to only be open for a week, and then it'll close again for another 6 months. So I would just encourage you to push that button right now and say, yes, I am going to invest in myself. It's time. It's time for me to make a change. I can't change my husband. I've tried. Heaven knows I've tried. I've tried to fix him. I've tried to pray for him. I've tried to change him. Maybe it's time to work on me. You know, I often say that if you change the dance in a destructive marriage, the dance changes. But you can't change someone else's dance steps. The only dance steps you can change are yours. So I would just encourage you to join. This price is low. It's been the same price for the last 2 years because I want everybody to join. The price never goes up once you join. Even if I choose to raise the prices next year, you're always going to stay at $27 a month as long as you stay in Conquer. So I would just love for you to take a chance on yourself. And I know that you will not be disappointed. Women who have been in Conquer have told me that it's been extremely life-changing. And I'm not taking the credit for that. It is totally God. God has blessed this group in amazing ways that I had never thought possible. And just having the opportunity to be a part and to learn from one another is, like I said, priceless. So take a chance on yourself. Take a chance on Conquer and give it 30 days to make a big difference in your life. So now I'm going to open it up to Q&A. And let me just encourage you to join Conquer so you can press the button, but I'm going to just answer some questions now when we go back. My tech assistant is getting me back online here so I don't get all goofy and press the wrong button. Where are we? I think you got to press the little button up there. It's nighttime. It's getting darker out here, so you see the color changing in my house. The light is going down, so we're going to try to brighten it up a little bit. But I'm going to answer some questions, and I'm going to stay here for a while. I really want to be of service to you and help you get what you need from this time. I really think time is probably our most valuable asset these days, at least it is mine. And I love giving you some of my time, and I love you giving me some of your time. So let's have a chat, and I'll hang out with you guys as long as you hang out with me, and we'll talk. For those of you who stay till the end now, you will get your bonus, which is a ebook that I wrote called In Her Shoes. It is a ebook that I wrote from my blog postings, and we took, I can't remember how many of them, but many of the most popular blog postings on all different topics, like if my husband sexually abuses me, or, my pastor told me this. It'll just give you some more wisdom on how I think and what I teach and how I help women in destructive marriages. So you can just really get some paper product right away that you can download and read on your computer, or, like I said, print it out if you need to, on just some great biblical wisdom on this topic of emotionally destructive marriages. So let me start with some questions. And we'll start with Joy. Says, my husband is a covert abuser. He has fooled his counselor, which is very common, and mine by being charming in sessions, acting like he's spiritual. At home, he's abusive. He gaslights with the counselor. And I would like to know how to explain it to them when I experience and why it's abusive. This is the hardest thing for counselors to see. And I just did a webinar for the American Association of Christian Counselors on the dark triad. And the dark triad is the wolf in sheep's clothing. And I'm not saying your husband is a wolf in sheep's clothing, but I'm going to actually do a video in a bonus section on Conquer on the dark triad, which is the extreme form of narcissism, more of the psychopathic, sociopathic. But the Bible talks about this wolf in sheep's clothing that looks like a sheep. He looks like a great man. He looks like one of us. He's a godly man. He's great. He's charming. Narcissists are often very charming, very affable, and very abusive at home. And your husband is a covert abuser, so they don't see it. So the only thing that you can do is this. You can document, and I highly encourage you to document the kinds of abuse he does, the covert things he does, whether it's twisting information. The hard thing about it is that when you start talking about it, it doesn't sound that bad. When you say, well, he fell asleep when I was talking to him, or he rolls his eyes when I try to explain something, and he tells me I'm talking too long, or he's told the kids that, I was PMSing and not to listen to me. When he says those things, it's like every pastor and every counselor who's male can sort of say, well, I might do that too. And so I can understand he shouldn't have done that, but it's not abusive. That's what happens. And so it's really important to document as much as you can the things that he's doing, so that you can come in with very specific phrases or very specific times, or this is how often he does it, so that abuse is more clear to your counselor. I think you can also say there's a difference between overt abuse and covert abuse, and I'd like you to investigate, even on the internet, what that looks like, so that your counselor can say, oh, because truth be told, I just want you guys to be really honest. Even in I want you to understand, even in graduate programs in seminary and in counseling, there isn't a lot taught about this. And so sometimes your counselor is somewhat unaware. They're ignorant about some of the abuser's tactics and what that looks like. And especially when a covert abuser is very charming and outgoing, especially when they're successful, in business or in whatever they're doing in ministry, it's really hard. And this is so important why you join Conquer, because what happens, what we do in Conquer is I will coach you on talking to your counselor, or talking to your pastor in those phone calls. And also as a part of you developing that core strength. Because what happens when a woman goes in and she's been beaten down by a covert abuser, she goes on into the counseling looking a little rough around the edges, right? She's already depleted or angry or depressed, and she's not thinking clearly. She may be bitter and resentful because she's just been battered. And he comes in looking like the great Christian guy. And, I know my wife's depressed. And, I try so hard, Pastor, to be the godly man. Nothing I do is good enough. And she's like, oh, you're such a liar, And so she starts looking like the bad one. She starts looking like the crazy one to the counselor, to the pastor. She starts looking like the abuser. And so when you don't come in with core strength and you don't come in with the right strategy, you end up leaving feeling like you're the victim again, because what happens is a covert abuser is an expert at looking, he switches things around so that the villain, I would call him the villain, he portrays himself as the victim, and the true victim starts looking like the villain to the church, to the counselor, to the kids. And that creates a host of other problems for you. And so one of the things we talk a lot about in Conquer is helping you to not get slid into that role, and how you can stay clear but godly in the way that you approach it. Because as soon as you approach it from a place of emotional reactivity, you start to look like the crazy one, and it validates what he's saying about you. And so I would just really encourage you to either join Conquer or get some personal coaching and personal help on how to approach this and how to stay clear and calm and factual. Because when you get emotional and reactive, and it's so hard not to when you've been beaten down and he's lying right in front of the pastor and you're saying, you're looking like, you idiot, you're a liar. How can you say that about that? It's not true. And the pastor's just saying, he's a great guy and she's losing her cool. She's probably the one who's more abusive than he is. And you have to understand, they're just getting a little snapshot. And the snapshot that he's providing looks a whole lot healthier than the snapshot you're providing. So that's why one of the reasons I'm so passionate about helping women not just get safe, but change your own dance steps so that you are handling yourself. I'm taking responsibility for myself and my own reactions. And I'm going to also be respectful in how I speak, but I am going to be committed to speaking the truth. I'm not covering for this anymore. And so therefore, in the covert part and the crazy making, you may have to document, because I know for many women, you document it and then he twists things around. You think, oh my gosh, did I really say that? And then you go back and you read what you wrote and you think, no, I didn't say that. This is what I said because I wrote it down right afterwards. This is what he said because I wrote it down right. And so it helps you stay clear. So I hope that's helpful. All right. How do I have the strength to leave? He refuses to talk about taking responsibility in the divorce process. Well, I'm not exactly sure why you need him to take responsibility in order for you to leave. Okay, here's the hook that many women get stuck in, is that as long as you need him to do something for you to be okay, then you can't be healthy. Part of being healthy as an adult is I don't need you to do something in order for me to be okay. I know how to be okay. I know how to take responsibility for myself and be okay. And when I put myself in the dependent position that I need you to love me in order for me to be okay, or I need you to take care of me in order for me to be okay, or I need you to approve of what I'm doing in order for me to be okay, you are sunk. Because then you're always living in dependency to how other people feel about you. And that's a really risky thing, right? Because whoever has 100% approval rating, even Jesus didn't. So one of the things that we talk about in Conquer is really important, is helping you to be healthy and strong. Not that you say, oh, I don't need you. That's not the attitude. I want you in my life. I value you in my life. But if you don't agree with me, or you disapprove of me, or you even don't love me someday, I'm going to feel bad because I'll miss you. But I don't need you, with a big old capital N, to love me in order for me to be okay. Because I know who I am, and I know that I'm a person of value and dignity and worth. And even if you don't love me, because people didn't love Jesus, and who wouldn't love Jesus? But then people didn't. It didn't make him unworthy or unlovable. And that's a mindset that you need to change in order for you to get clear. So your question is, how do I do this if he's not going to cooperate? If you need him to cooperate, in most states, you don't need the other person to cooperate to get divorced. Now, it's certainly easier financially with the kids, but you don't need that in order for you to get safe and for you to get free if someone is being abusive and oppressive to you. And you need a good lawyer, but you don't need that person to cooperate. It's easier, like I said, but not necessary. All right, I'm separated. Sherry's saying, I'm separated 3 years. He now got a lawyer and wants to divorce. Yet he is now reducing my spousal support drastically. I feel punished and abused more. Yep, that's really common. He's still trying to control you financially by financially abusing you. That's why I talked about financial safety. So, Sherry, you have to recognize that you're dealing with someone who's going to play hardball with you, and he's not going to be a nice guy, and he's going to get a tough lawyer. And so if you're going to get safe and stay clear about things, then you're going to have to get a lawyer to fight for you. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give you legal advice, but it is shocking sometimes how dirty our husbands play. So it's like, I love you, I love you, I love you. Come back, come back, come back. Do what I say, do what I say. You're not going to do it. I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt you bad. So if the change is happening, when you really change and you really want to work things out, you don't hurt someone when they don't do what you want, right? And so, but the pattern of an abuser, this is how you know if they're really changing. And you have the freedom to say, no, I'm not ready to reconcile, or no, I don't trust you yet. If someone's really changing, they'll say, I understand that. These are the consequences of my behavior over the years. I've broken trust, and I will do what it takes to rebuild trust. But when an abuser and a controller says, you know, I've changed and I'm better, let's get back together, and you say, no, I don't trust you yet, I'm not willing to do that. Okay, I'm going to hurt you. You're going to pay. And that's how you know nothing's different. It's just a different strategy. Oh, I'm wonderful. I'll be back. And if you don't do what I say, I'm going to hurt you again. It's the same strategy, just nicer side of the moon. Okay. So when nobody asked this question, but let me just draw a picture. So this is really important. So this is really rough here. All right. So this is the abuse cycle. All right. If this is the abuse cycle, and if this, whatever kind of abuse you're experiencing. So if this is abuse, whatever it is, at the 12 o'clock hour, okay? And at the 3 o'clock hour, he's a nice guy because either he feels bad about what he did, or you're going to implement some consequence. So he's going to buy you flowers and try to make it up to you so that you don't implement that consequence, or whatever. You know, he's done with his anger, and so now he's going back to his good side, okay? He's a nice guy. And here, he starts to have the tension build up again. Whatever aggravates him in life, all right? And this is the buildup, all right? So often, I'm having a cramp in my hand. So often what happens is women get really confused, because when this side of the moon happens, or this side of the abuse cycle happens, and he turns into the nice guy, they think, oh, he's got it. He's changing. He's not changing. This is the abuse cycle. Your husband has a nice guy part, or you wouldn't have married him, right? So there's a part of him that is a good guy, or a nice guy, or kind, or whatever he is. You know, I'm not denying that, but there's this part. The part that you want to watch for to see if he's changing, especially if you've been separated, is this part, okay? So here, when he's getting worked up, he's mad at you, you're not cooperating, you're having your own voice, you're having your own choice, you're saying no, normal stuff of marriage. Is he handling himself better on this side, or is he then going to abuse you again? Is he going to punish you, which is what she talked about? So he did this, she wouldn't cooperate, and so now he's going to hurt her financially, right? He's going to get his own attorney, he's going to punish you, I'm going to hurt you because you left me, right? And so this is the part that we want to see changing in, is when he doesn't get his way and you begin to assert yourself, and you have control over yourself, and you're not letting him control your decisions anymore, and you're asserting yourself. Can he handle that and deal with that in a godly way? And when he doesn't, can he own that and say, you know what? I have a hard time handling your no, and I've got to work on that. That's different. But when they don't get fooled by this nice guy on this side that everything's better. It's not. Okay, so that was sort of an extra without the question. My husband said that he hides things because he doesn't want to lecture. He also blames his mom too. So what you could say to him, this would be like a Conquer call. So if you were talking to me on Conquer and he said, I would ask you some more questions about that, which I can't do. But right now I would say, so what I might say to him is this. So are you saying to me that when I challenge your, the way that you paid the taxes, or when I challenge what you said about, how you spent the money, or when I ask you questions about the money that's come out of the ATM thing that I'm not allowed to do that because it makes you lie? Is that what you're saying? Because what he's basically saying is we can't have an adult relationship. What he's saying is I want the freedom to do whatever I want to do without any kickback from you. He's calling it a lecture. But when you're in an adult relationship with someone in marriage, I think you have the right to give your spouse some feedback, like, what are you doing here? Or, you know, why did you do it this way? Or why did you file the taxes this way? Or I don't understand why you took so much money out of the ATM. We agreed on $50 and I see a withdrawal here for $150. What's that about? If you're not allowed to ask those questions and get some information without him saying, well, now I have to lie to you because I don't want to hear about it. What he's really saying is you're not allowed to tell me anything negative. You're not allowed to give me any negative feedback or anything that you don't like about me because that makes me lie. Now, that's not true. What he's doing is he's lying because he wants to do what he wants to do without any consequence, which is the elements of a destructive person's thought life, is that I get to live like however I want. I get to watch pornography. I get to lie about money. I get to cheat as much as I want to. I get to hurt you, and you're not allowed to protest. And if you do, oh, you're lecturing me. Do you see how he twists it and makes you feel bad about you when you're just saying, wait a minute, what's this about? Why did you make this decision? And you're asking for a normal conversation. Now, I do say that women can be shaming and lecturing, and men can too in the way that they do it. And so in my book, The Emotionally Destructive Marriage, I do give you some specific ways to say things that aren't shaming, but are still confrontive in an adult kind of way. And so again, we talk a lot about that on Conquer on the phone call. So that's what people were talking about in the endorsements of, you know, she helps us say things in a different way, because I do think that we can say things that are ways that are demeaning, and that's not what we want to do. If we're going to walk in core strength, we're going to speak with respect, but we're going to still speak the truth, and we're going to have the freedom to ask those questions. And if our husband can't bear to have that, that's part of the destructive pattern, is that I'm not allowed to give him any feedback about his life or his relationship with me or how he interacts with me or how he spends money without him thinking that I'm the bad guy, right? All right. Cynthia wonders, should I let go after 47 women? Are you talking about affairs with 47 women? You've counted them all, or 47 women, a lot of extra women. Let's see, where'd it go? 40, it left now, where is it? Keep going down. We lost you, I'm sorry. But 47 women, it was enough to get my attention. I guess I'm thinking you're way too forbearing. 47 women says to me that he doesn't have much respect for you as his wife, and that he doesn't have much respect for him as a man. He doesn't have much respect for women. They're objects to use. You're one of them. You're the wife. And he has other sexual partners that he uses for other things. But I think 47 women is good enough proof to say that he's not repentant and he's not going to change. So you have to decide. And here's the deal that I would coach you with if we were on the phone in Conquer. I would say, you're not going to change him. So the past is the best predictor of the future. So 47 women is a pretty good marker of the past. So you have to decide, as an adult person, do I want to live with a chronic adulterer? Because he's not going to change. And if I don't, then what if you said to him something like this? You know, I understand that you want your freedom to be sexual with whoever you want to. I mean, obviously there's evidence that 47 women, probably 147. I only know about the 47, but that's what you want. You want the freedom to do whatever you want to do. And I can't stop you. Even though I'm your wife, that's not my job to control your sexual life. That's your job. And since that's what you choose to do and that's what you want to do, I don't choose to live like that anymore. I don't choose to live with someone who wants to do that. That's not healthy for me. That's dangerous for me, for my sexuality, for my mental health, to live with a man who has so little respect for me as a wife that he would choose to be with 47 other women. So I don't choose to live like that. Do you see how important that is for you to be able to say that in that empowering way, that I'm making a choice for me? I'm not begging you continuously to change your ways. When you've shown me again and again and again and again, you're not going to change. So now I've got to kind of accept hard reality. 47 women, whatever else you wrote in that question that I didn't get to, things aren't going to change. I guess I have to accept that this isn't going to be any different. So now what decisions do I have? Do I stay? And if I choose to stay, can I stay well? Or do I leave? And how do I leave well? And those are the choices that we talk about in Conquer and how to do that. All right. Elizabeth wants to know, how do you become a God-centered woman? Oh, Elizabeth, I love that question because that's one of my favorite things to do. You know, I think the woman of Proverbs 31 is a great example of a God-centered woman. You know, she was resourceful. She was independent. She made her own money. She was kind and generous. She was a hard worker. So we think about that and we get exhausted. We think, oh my gosh, I could never be a Proverbs 31 woman. But those were things that she did, right? But the main thing it says about her character in Proverbs 31 is that she was a woman of strength and dignity. And because she was a woman of strength and dignity, it says, and she smiled at the future, unafraid. Wouldn't you like to be that kind of woman? A woman of strength and dignity who could smile at the future, unafraid? Well, how we do that is we become a God-centered woman and not a self-centered woman, which the world would tell us to be, or a man-centered woman, which the world tells us we have to have a man in order for us to feel okay, or the church may tell us that. But we don't. We would like to have a man in our life, or a husband, of course. Everybody would like a partner, but a partner, not a dictator. And so when we're a healthy adult woman that's a God-centered woman, what we're saying is, God, I want what you want for my life. And you don't want me to be abused. God definitely says that. He doesn't want us to be abused. Even Jesus, if you think about his abuse, people say, well, Jesus suffered. Well, sort of and sort of not. If you just read the book of John, for example, just the book of John, the Gospel of John, there's other places, but just go through the book of John. You will see many places where Jesus said he knew that they were plotting to hurt him or harm him, and he disappeared from their midst. He escaped from them. He didn't allow himself to suffer. The only time he allowed himself to suffer at the hands of the sinners, the Pharisees, the only time was when it was for a greater good. And what was the greater good? To die for our sins. He didn't let himself suffer for no good reason. He died on the cross. The greater good was that he was going to suffer for our forgiveness. He didn't let himself just get beaten up and, all of that other times. He left. He taught. He disagreed with the Pharisees. He stood up for himself, right? He didn't let himself just be run over in all of those different times. He didn't retaliate. He teaches us very clearly not to retaliate, not to repay evil for evil. But he didn't just enable people to cause him to suffer for no good reason. And so it's really important for you not to allow that to happen either. So being a God-centered woman means that God is your anchor, not your marriage, not your husband, that God keeps you stable. And I think another good example of that in the scriptures was Mary. She was a God-centered woman, so that even though she was given a pretty scary job to be pregnant with the Son of God, who's going to believe her? I mean, if you really think about that, who's going to believe a 16-year-old or 14, however old she was at the time? I mean, Joseph, I'm not sure really believed her until the angel told him, right? I don't think Mary's mother, we don't really read about it, but can you imagine the 16-year-old coming home and telling you, the Holy Spirit told me that he impregnated me. No, Mom, I didn't have sex. Promise, I really didn't have sex, but I am pregnant. Really? Really? I mean, can imagine? So Mary wasn't, she was strong and dignified, and she, I'm sure, took her licks about what happened, and she didn't faze her because she knew who she was and she knew who grounded her, and it was God, not other people. And so when other people didn't like her or criticized her or made fun of her or called her names, and I'm sure they did, it stung, but it didn't crush her. That's what it means to be a God-centered woman. So when you know God and you know he loves you and you put him at the center of your life, I need God, not all this other stuff, then that's what a God-centered woman is. And we talk a lot about that in Conquer. All right, Maria says, what kind of boundaries can you put in place if you are not financially independent? He has multiple addictions: food, video games, spending, watching inappropriate stuff, already separated 6 months, came back to see if there's changes, things are the same. I'm taking a training so I go back to work. What else can I do? All right, so Maria, that's a really good question. And I love the idea that you're taking responsibility for yourself. That's part of Conquer, and saying, my husband, the truth is, he's irresponsible with money. He's self-indulgent. He's not using our money wisely, and I can't depend on him to manage the family funds. Now, I'm not sure if he's been the sole breadwinner, so whether he gives you an allowance to use for family functions or not, the fact that you're saying, I got to go back to work. And a lot of women resist that. And I don't blame you. I wanted to stay home with my kids too. And I didn't homeschool them, but, you homeschool, 3 or 4 kids or 8 kids or how many kids you have. And you want this Walton kind of life, this, Little House on the Prairie kind of life. And I don't diminish that. But when the hard facts of reality are smacking you in the face saying, we're going off the cliff as a family, you may have to make different choices for your welfare and for your kids' welfare. And it doesn't mean they're going to be damaged. In fact, they might be more damaged for you to stay that way and have the family fall apart than for you to say, I need to take more action. So Maria, I think part of taking responsibility for yourself is getting a job, earning your own money, and not giving it to your husband to manage. I think it's also, you said, boundaries are, if you want to live this lifestyle of basically self-indulgence, that I don't know how to have a relationship with you because nothing I say matters to you. You're married to your self-centeredness, your video games, your pleasures, your food, your other addictions. That's what you want the most in life. You don't want a partner. Why did you get married? And to have some tough conversations with your spouse, not in a shaming way, but these are your choices. By your choices, you're showing me the kind of person you want to be. Is this the kind of person you want to be? And if not, he might say, no, I hate that. I don't want to be addicted. People are addicted to stuff that they hate. I get that. How many of us, eat too much or do something, too much. And we say, oh, I don't want to be watching QVC anymore. I shouldn't be spending my money. We do that. So I don't want to judge him as, worse than anybody else. We all struggle with those things. But when we struggle with them, him included, are we struggling enough with not wanting to do this anymore? Are we saying, I am not only not wanting to do this anymore, but I am going to put measures in place to protect myself against not doing it anymore? What kind of accountability partners do I have? What kind of support do I have to lead that? And that's one of the wonderful things about Conquer, is that you have this group where we say to each other online, okay, I'm going to talk with my husband tonight, pray for me. And then everybody prays for you and then says, okay, what happened? So now you're accountable to all of us to say, okay, we want to hear the scoop. How did you do? And what happened? And if you blew it, okay, now what's next? Let's work on that. So that you're always having an opportunity to come back and work on yourself and grow and change. Doesn't mean you do everything right. Nobody does, including me. But we work on it together. We hold each other's hands. We hold each other's arms up. And that's what makes you strong, is having that community of like-minded people that know what your life is like and know your goals. And there's some women who are further along in the journey, and there's others who aren't. And those who have gotten further along are so willing to pull those who have felt stuck and frozen along on the journey, because they know they were stuck and frozen once too, and they're not anymore. So I would encourage you to take that responsibility for yourself, not only financially, but for your life and for your marriage, and what's the future hold, and to have some tough conversations with your spouse. All right. And Scott wants to know, do I have or can I point to a men's version of Conquer? Scott, I've been asked that before, and I'm open to starting a man, or maybe somebody else can start a man's version of Conquer. Probably it'd be better to have a man who hosts that. Maybe Chris will do that. I don't know. Chris Moles is my colleague. But yes, I think it's a really good idea to have a man's version of Conquer, because I do know that men are abuse victims as well, and they need that support. It's especially a shameful thing for men to talk about being abused by their wife, because it's like, well, you're a man, you shouldn't put up with that. Whereas a woman, you're a woman, you should submit to that. Somehow it's different advice for men and for women, but I think it is really hard to talk about that. And so I don't have a man's group for Conquer, but I think it's a great idea. And maybe God will lead you or someone else to start one, but I think it's important, and I hope you get the support you need. Jewel says, I'm asking him to go to counseling and wants to go forward with divorce next month. So will Conquer still be beneficial for you? Yeah, absolutely. Because I just want you to understand that when you've been in an unhealthy relationship for a long time, there's probably elements of you that are a little bit unhealthy or a lot unhealthy. Not every woman in Conquer is a healthy woman. And so you still have your own work to do, because a number of women in Conquer will attest to marrying after getting divorced the same man over and over again, not intending to, saying, I swear I'm not going to marry the same man over again. And lo and behold, there he is. They picked him again. So there's something about our unhealthiness that attracts unhealthiness in someone else sometimes too. And so part of my mission in Conquer isn't to help you have wisdom only about your marriage, but it's helping you to get healthy and strong, to be a God-centered woman of strength and dignity, of emotional, mental, and spiritual health. So that whether you're married, you can stay well, or whether you can't stay married anymore and you leave well, you don't go back into another relationship that's unhealthy because you're still not healthy. That's what holy means, whole. And whole is healthy mentally, thinking truthfully, living in sync with who God called you to be. Romans is a really good picture of this. And I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but Romans 1 talks about the unhealthy person, all right? It's a big descriptor of the unhealthy person. And it says it starts by exchanging the truth of God for a lie. We all do it. The heart is deceitful above all else. We all have a tendency to believe lies over truth. We went through some of those lies in the webinar. So it starts with exchanging the truth of God for a lie. And if we don't recognize that and be transformed by the renewing of our mind, then what happens is the more we exchange the truth of God for a lie, and the more we do that our mind becomes more and more deformed. And we probably couldn't see that any clearer than in our culture today. We hear people who see things and say things in the craziest, deformed kind of way. Crazy thinking about what life should be like and how people should behave and what their rights are, entitlement. All of that is so deformed from the person that God created us to be. But they do that by exchanging the truth of God for a lie. We all do it. So part of our mission in Conquer isn't just to help you fix your marriage. It's helping to fix you so that you're a woman who is formed, not deformed, formed in the image that God created you to become, so that you become all of the woman that God called you to be. And we have very little teaching. And I'm getting off on a little tangent here, so bear with me. But we have very little teaching for women on how to be strong, capable, courageous, brave women. We've got tons of teaching for women to be submissive and respectful and kind and loving and humble. And I'm not disparaging those qualities. But let's just do a little experiment here, if you will indulge me. And I don't know how many of you are left here, but I'm going a little long. But if you did 2 columns, and this is part of what I love to do in Conquer. If I were with you in a group and we were just in a retreat or in a little teaching center, and you were given an assignment. So if we were to say, okay, who is a godly woman? Okay, I can't even spell tonight. So a godly woman, and we thought, all right. So if we were to ask a group of Christians to list all the character qualities of a godly woman, you would probably say she's humble, she's compassionate, she's loving, she's nurturing, she's kind, she's giving, she's, forgiving, all the wonderful qualities that a godly woman would be. And if you were to do the same thing and say, all right, let's list the qualities for a godly man, and on this side, and he would be the same, he'd be humble and loving, but he would have some different qualities, wouldn't he? He would be a leader. He would be courageous. He would be brave. He would be strong. Well, what happened here? Like, why isn't the godly woman got some of those qualities too? And it's because we have feminized godly women instead of giving her the whole character of God. And that we think of in Genesis, in the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created him. So if male and female comprises the image of God, and we're to become godly women, strong and dignified godly women. And strong and dignified godly men, right? Then for a godly man to be a true godly man, he would have to embrace and embody some feminine qualities, traditionally labeled feminine qualities, like humility, like gentleness, right? I mean, he would have to. He was all strong and leadership and, bold and courageous. And if he didn't have any humility, he would be a bully and a dictator, right? So he'd have to have some feminine in order for him to truly be a godly man. But why is it for a godly woman, there's no masculine? For a godly woman, she's all feminine. And I'm saying that's not right. She does need to be brave. She does need to be strong. She does need to be courageous. And I teach that in a way that nobody else does that I know these days. And so I think it's really important for you to understand that to be a God-centered woman, we do need to embrace some of these other characteristics that traditionally we've not been taught. How do we be courageous like Esther and the midwives in the Hebrew times who didn't kill the babies and Pharaoh ordered them to kill? They were courageous. They were brave women. Queen Vashti, who was brave enough to say no to her husband. I'm not going out to dance for your drunken friends. And she suffered a consequence for that. Abigail, who was brave and went against her husband and defied and didn't submit to him and went and talked to David like a person and said, David, what are you thinking? This isn't the man that God calls you to be. She was courageous to do that. And she saved her household. How can we learn those things? I want to teach you and conquer. I think this is really critical for women in our day and for you to teach your daughters in order for you to be the women that God calls us to be in this upcoming society. It's a scary world we live in, and it's not just about our destructive marriages. It's about the next generation. And so kind of went off on a little tangent there, but that's what I want to do. So how about we do one more question, and I'll let you go. My husband is emotionally abusive, very dismissive, demeaning, objectifies me, rude, yells when I say anything that challenges him. Yeah. On those off times when everything's going his way, he's nice. Hello, sweetheart. How do I act toward him on those okay moments? Really good question. So that's what happens in this side. So he's been abusive. He calls you these horrible names, and then hello, hi, sweetheart. Right? So this is where you would have to have you wouldn't do this on the cuff. You would have to have a planned conversation with him. Because what he's saying is, hey, I can vomit all over you whenever I want. And then I can say, hello, sweetheart, and everything looks good again, doesn't it? And that's just not reality. When you vomit all over someone, there's consequences, right? But he's living as if there are no consequences, and you're enabling that by, hello, sweetheart. Oh, hello, how are you? Because we don't want to make waves and we don't want to get vomited on again, right? We sort of live in that pattern. And so in Conquer, I will teach you how to have a tough conversation, not a shaming conversation, but a tough conversation and saying, you know, I'm confused. This would be one way you can do it. There's lots of other ways, and I will give you the alternatives in Conquer as we talk about this. But one way is, I'm really confused. Last night you called me this, I would say the exact words, this. And today I'm your sweetheart. That's really confusing to me, because I don't know how to respond to what you called me last night today when you call me sweetheart. It just feels incongruent to me. And if he says, well, I was just mad. Well, not every husband who's mad calls their wife this. That's not okay with me. And it's not okay with me that you ignore it and act as if it's no big deal. It's a big deal to me. I don't like it. Right? And so I can't just bounce back and pretend everything's okay just because you're in a better mood today than you were last night. I'm still covered with vomit, and I don't like it. Right? In addition, that conversation, then how would you need to set boundaries next time you see him building up so that you're not letting yourself get vomited on? And those are things that we teach in Conquer. So we're almost 2 hours. I so appreciate you hanging in here with me, and I want to pray for you if it's okay with you before we go, just because you've been here. I know that you're hurting. You've given a lot of time, and I appreciate that. So I want to pray for you and just ask God to give you great wisdom about what your next steps are, because even if you decide not to join Conquer, which is totally fine, I hope you do what you need to do to get safe, get strong, to be a God-centered woman, and get the support that you need, because you do need that support to break free of destructive patterns. All right? Lord Jesus, I thank you for these people who are watching, both men and women, who are hurting because of hurtful and destructive relationships. Lord, you love them. You care about how we treat people. And God, help us for minimizing this in the church and not taking a more active role in helping families and helping couples get it right. We enable by our silence. And saying nothing to these kind of injustices and these kind of abusive speech. And God, I pray that you would really help us to be good people helpers, good pastors, good counselors, those who are listening. And Lord, that you would help women who are victims and men be able to speak out for themselves, not in a brash, shaming, abusive way back, but to say, this is not okay. It is not okay for me to be treated this way, and God is on the side of the oppressed. And they would really see that and believe that. Thank you for this time that we've had together. Just pray for them that you would help them to be strong and to make good decisions on what they need to do to get the support, education, and help they need to go forward. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. God bless. Take care. Bye-bye.